we're going to be doing a little bit of a debate, a recap, and fun day as well. But like, come on, let's be real. You expected this to happen. I mean, I have to do a recap, right? Like, I mean, it's been crazy. We had 120,000 people tuning in here yesterday, 130 almost, and another 100K on the other side. Asman Gold. Like, this is the thing that a lot of people actually watched. It was the most unemployed Super Bowl of all time, and obviously, I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about some aspects of it because, like, I do feel apologetic. In some ways, I feel kind of sad because my goal yesterday, as you guys probably noticed or you probably heard ahead of time because I kept saying it over and over again, was to have a conversation around the actual situation that matters, which is Israel's mass starvation campaign, and also how my former podcast co-host has like handled himself throughout this process with like an endless sea of harassment, right? Endless sea of harassment towards people that don't have the same perspective that he does. I guess the apology that I want to start off with is that, I think I should have redirected it further. I think I should have redirected the conversation back to the issues that matter a little bit further. But there were definitely instances where I just like kind of let him get away with saying things and then moving on, even though he was very clearly lying about those things. And I had evidence. I had the information. I could have just pulled it up, but it was very difficult to pull up some of the information. He didn't want me to like show my side all that much. Ultimately, he did most of the work making himself look a certain way to the onlookers. But I do believe that, like, I believe personally, because I have a very high bar here for myself, that I wanted to clear in terms of actually getting to the issues that matter and not letting anything get away with by, saying things like that he is actually against the genocide and that he is actually admitting to it being a genocide. Because his behavior did not make sense. His behavior was inconsistent. And there was also some issues that I wanted to get to, the conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism that we didn't actually talk about as well. I don't know. I go back and forth on thinking whether or not Ethan genuinely and legitimately thinks I'm anti-Semitic. Because of the way he's presented himself, I still land on him him hating me and then just like wanting there to be a good reason for him to hate me, beyond the fact that his fan base turned on him and it hurt his feelings because they did not see him as like an intellectual beacon who had the morally correct position on Israel-Palestine. And they didn't treat him with a bit of grace and baby him through the process because the situation was direct, and the conflict in and of itself, the genocide, is so severe that it's like impossible for people to not have an unnuanced and very straightforward opinion on it. And it's understandable because this is the one thing that is understandable to have a black and white perspective on, right? But yeah, Ethan Klein, regarding the zone of interest comparison, so you're saying everyone living in Israel is living next to a concentration camp? Hasan, yes. Yeah, of course. But again, I know you are still not assuming good faith from Ethan after yesterday. You're too good, King. No, I don't. I did not even expect him to be that good faith in general. I just didn't expect how bad faith he would get. But it doesn't matter because like people who watched it, who already had preconceived notions of Israel-Palestine, that have found themselves in this unique slotting ideologically where they think like Israel's doing a genocide, but also everyone that's resisting against said genocide are also bad. This is an interesting position that American liberals have because of the endless amount of Islamophobic sentiment, the endless amount of Western chauvinism that has been baked into their collective consciousness. Every single militancy, every single organization, every single standing military that has ever resisted against Western forces is always in the wrong until time has passed and they've maybe won some concessions or liberated their country, at which point it's appropriate. But while it's happening, while we're in the process, it's the age-old adage: liberals are for every civil rights movement except the current one. Liberals are for every single anti-war movement except the current one. Yeah, people go, IDF and Hamas are in the wrong. It's not a hard concept. But it actually is an incredibly unnuanced position to take because no, they're not both in the wrong. It's not a hard concept. One is a significantly worse group than the other, the IDF being the significantly worse group. And the reality of the matter is, many people don't want to recognize that, even though it is objectively true. I hope that that 14-month subscriber understands my position on this, because there is no comparison between the Israeli occupying force and Hamas, especially because Hamas is a militant resistance group against the apartheid that is maintained by the Israeli occupying force. That is the major problem. I'll give you what the areas that I think were just like super dominant throughout the entire conversation, and I'll tell you what my biggest L's were. In terms of the areas where my biggest, I guess, quote unquote W's were, there are, I believe, around 7, if not more, instances where Ethan basically agreed to my position and even went as far as to apologize for things that he has done in the past. So that's fairly significant. Most of it was from the context nuke, and I think that, you know, that's not something to just like lightly cast aside, especially considering that this is supposed to be his pivotal work that he put a lot of effort and research into. Or even with the ADL example, like, or even the CPS call. I was like, and what's interesting about that is he had to basically admit that he had no evidence whatsoever that it was actually coming from my community at all, or even the snark subreddits. Oh, by the way, this chatter saying, honestly, your only L was calling Gila, getting him to admit Gila is a terrorist or something. No, the reason why I brought that up was to expose the double standard, to showcase Ethan's Islamophobia, Ethan's racism in this process, because it plays a big role. I don't have the attitude, and I tried to explain to him over and over again, like, what Gila had done was a night raid. And the only reason why I know what that looks like, what a night raid looks like, and what the actual express purpose of the Israeli occupying force is in conducting those night raids is because of breaking the silence. Breaking the Silence is an Israeli philanthropic organization, an Israeli organization that works against the occupation. And it's comprised entirely of former Israeli occupying force veterans. So, of course, I have interviewed people who have been a part of the Israeli occupying force, as well as interviewed people that have been conscientious objectors. So I don't actually hold people's social conditioning when they're young against them. I think that would be silly. It is entirely the opposite of my worldview. It goes against my worldview. I believe everyone can change their attitude. Everyone can change their mentality. My frustration was twofold. One, that he, on the one hand, washed that aside by saying she was 19, it's forced mandatory conscription, but then also simultaneously would turn around and smear a dude and call him a fucking terrorist, which a lot of people still keep claiming over and over again. If you want to get it right, you can get it right. I don't have an issue with, even if he was a Houthi, I would not have an issue with interviewing him, for the record, as I've said over and over again. Yeah, I know you were trying to say can you call Rashad a terrorist, for instance, but not Hila, to get him to understand the double standard, but it seems like you were just trying to call Hila a terrorist, I think. No, because I did say exactly those words, but I guess it gets lost in the conversation when the impact point is getting Ethan to say that his wife could be considered a terrorist just to move on. Yeah, and he asked me how I feel about that as well, and I tried to explain to him, like, I don't hold people's past actions against them as long as they have learned and have grown from their previous positions, because I understand, as someone who lives in the Western world, as someone who lives in America, I understand how powerful social conditioning is. I understand how someone who's 18 years old will join the Israeli Defense Force from their perspective, right? I get that. I totally understand that. But through the cruelty of their actions, like, they should recognize that this is wrong, or at least 10, 20 years down the line, they don't still maintain the position that what they did was good, and that still continuously defend the Israeli occupying force. People, even leftists, seem to be struggling with the conversation around sexual assault in relation to the conflict. So those are the two L's that I'm gonna talk about. One, the conversation revolving mass sexual assault, systematic sexual assault directed by Hamas. I will be talking about that extensively. And then the other conversation that I think got lost in the weeds was, I feel like we talked past one another on the Avi Shlaim point, on the point about the Nakba being compared to expulsion and also voluntary migration of Jewish people from surrounding Arab nations. And I think on that one, we definitely talk past one another. And I want to like go back and relitigate it, or I want to go back and understand Ethan's position, because I think one of the main points of contention here always is the fact that Ethan will present my position in the worst possible framework to make it seem as though I don't believe certain things that he's bringing forward. And the reality of the matter is there's never been a moment where I have denied that there has not been expulsions of Jewish people or pogroms of Jewish people, especially in the aftermath of 1948, especially in the aftermath of the Nakba. This is something that I have talked about as well over and over and over again. But the problem, there's two problems with Ethan's framework. One, that he believes that I'm denying that Jews were harmed in this process in surrounding Arab nations. I'm not denying that at all. What I'm simply stating is that the trigger point of this all is the Nakba, which is a planned and executed deliberate ethnic cleansing campaign, which is done by one singular ideology, as opposed to the reaction of that from surrounding Arab nations cannot be compared to one another, especially when you factor in the reality that some of these surrounding Arab nations and MENA nations weren't even autonomous at that point. They were literally under the rulership of Vichy France at a certain point, or they were literally under the rulership of under the control of England at a certain point. So the notion that these countries had this organic or collective hive-minded anti-Semitism that manifested and exploded is utterly ridiculous in comparison to a planned and deliberate mass expulsion campaign. And the Palestinians had nothing to do with the surrounding Arab nations in any way, shape, or form, regardless. These are totally separate countries. But the reality of the matter is he could not see beyond the fact that they were Arabs. And I think a bastardization of Avi Shleim's perspective to drive home that point, because he got someone to basically clip from his latest book and his commentary key points that make it seem as though Avi Shleim's ultimate perspective is that Arabs were forced to become Zionist is I think a great misunderstanding of a historian that has spent most of his work talking against that. His big point is, you know how there's a double Holocaust or a double genocide theory that a lot of neo-Nazis immediately implemented in the aftermath of World War II. This is known by scholars of history as the double genocide theory, that the USSR also did a genocide, and actually their genocides were far larger in scale and number, and therefore they are the worst party in World War II. It's a way to try to whitewash and launder the reputation of Germany, Nazi Germany. A similar perspective took place in Ethan's commentary, which is the double Nakba almost. Yeah, here's Spencer Gabb saying, I read the first two chapters of The Three Worlds after the debate. Avi Shleim literally describes the fallacy of a double Nakba like this. The purpose of this narrative is to create a false symmetry between the fate of the two communities. The narrative is not history, it is propaganda of the victors. Read this excerpt highlighted from the same Avi Shleim Ethan misquoted. Yeah, this is from Three Worlds, Memoirs of an Arab Jew. And this is from the prologue. It is impossible to make sense of this history without the regional context. Post-1950 Arab, Jewish, or Mizrahi history becomes a part of Israel's history and as such is divorced from its wider regional environment. Zionists are only obsessively interested in the first phase of the Arab-Jewish history. They are profoundly uninterested in the second. Interested in the first phase is driven not by the search for truth, but by propaganda need to portray the Jews as victims of the endemic Arab persecution, a portrayal that is then used to justify Israel's own atrocious treatment of the Palestinians. A rich, fascinating, and multidimensional history is thus reduced to the quest for ammunition to use in the ongoing war against the Palestinians. This trend reached its climax with the manufacture of the narrative of the Jewish Nakba. According to this narrative, the forced exodus of 850,000 Jews from Arab countries after 1948 amounted to a catastrophe, a Jewish Nakba, at least on par with, if not more devastating in its consequences than the Palestinian Nakba. Variously called the Forgotten Exodus, the Forced Exodus, or the Double Exodus. The purpose of this narrative is to create a false symmetry between the fate of the two communities. This narrative is not history, it is propaganda of the victors. There has never been a moment where I have discounted that there was anti-Semitism that took place, especially during the pan-Arabic nationalist movements, where a lot of these Arabic countries that had aligned themselves with European colonial power at the time in an effort to develop sovereignty and nation states, even though they previously were under the rulership of the empire, for example, they did do that, and that was a big part of this pan-Arabic nationalist movement that created these nation states to begin with. Nation states whose boundaries were carefully constructed by Western superpowers. Honest history has to acknowledge the part played by all the governments concerned in causing this man-made tragedy. The main difference is that the Palestinian refugees, for the most part, were ethnically cleansed by the Israeli armed forces, whereas the Arab Jews, with a few exceptions, were given by Arab governments the option of leaving or staying. My book is both a personal record of a complex past and an essay with a political argument. It is a critique of Zionism from the perspective that is rarely heard outside of Israel. So, like, his pivotal work that Ethan was misquoting unironically seeks to address the argument that Ethan falsely presented in his context nuke, which is why I said I will have Avi Shlaim on. I'm working on it right now with some of my friends to get him on the broadcast to address this with his own personal words. Problem is lowest common denominator audience response to quick gotchas, and I hate any nuance. I mean, it doesn't matter. I think that there was plenty of quick gotchas as well. It's just like it's one that I was able to achieve plenty of. The problem is no one really cares about that either, because everyone is invested in the conquest of drama. Everyone is invested in the conquest of like their favorite content creator, or maybe not even their favorite content creator, but like content creator that's going up against their content creator that they despise. Me in this case. That's why I saw this phenomenon of neo-Nazis, like active neo-Nazi accounts, openly singing the praises of Ethan Klein, a Jewish man, right? There were so many out and about neo-Nazi accounts on Twitter that were like, this Jew destroyed the Islamo-Turk, shit like that. And the conversation revolved around him saying that like this, the bleach sword was fucking anti-Semitic, or Frogan's thumbnail was anti-Semitic. Like, these are not conversations that neo-Nazis would normally entertain at all. The reason why they were entertaining it was precisely because they like, oh, this is it. This is what I was literally talking about. Literal, actual neo-Nazis handshaking with Ethan Piker coming back from the debate with H3H3. This person's name is Haya Saka Aryan, Kaguya's top gal, a straightforward neo-Nazi, right? Like, does this not ring any alarm bells in Ethan's mind as a person who is Jewish, who has Jewish children, who is seeing the growth of anti-Semitism on the timeline, not realizing that these guys actually are more invested, perhaps for some nefarious purpose, in undermining me and my position here? I wonder what that reason is. I wonder why. I wonder why so many people who will spam W Hitler in chats are on board with what Ethan was saying. I don't think that any of these guys are going to recognize this, though, because it's so hyper specific to Ethan's own anger. And for guys like this, I don't think this person likes Ethan. I mean, they're a neo-Nazi, right? Like, they probably spot Ethan. Many of the content creators, the drama slop tubers, have actually shit on Ethan quite frequently and generated tens of millions of views off of shitting on Ethan, sometimes anti-Semitically shitting on Ethan as well. And why are they now on board with Ethan? Is it because my argument is awful and I am just completely wrong? Is it because they disagree? No, it's because this is an opportunity for them to try and actively undermine the position of someone who they see as an ideological opponent. And they do not see Ethan as an ideological opponent in this regard. If his community doesn't recognize that they're now welcoming these kinds of reactionary sentiments, and that's not ringing any alarm bells for them, it would be akin to me unironically aligning myself with Myron Gaines and Sneeko and Candace Owens, right? Or Dan Bilzerian. These are people with massive audiences, but I don't align myself with them. I actually spend a good deal of time actually shitting on their positions as well. This is something that I don't think the drama girlies will understand. That is a major issue here. Your sexual assault argument was the worst one to me as a survivor, but I've heard you talk about it, so I know where you're coming from. It did sound like you relied on court cases for sexual assault, which is ass, but watching your previous VODs, I know where you stand. No, I'm gonna get to that in a second as well. Because if you noticed, he did something very nefarious there. The short and sweet of it on that one was the shocking display of disingenuousness from Ethan on that part, where he said that I was denying the atrocity propaganda that Israel has committed when saying that Hamas directed systematic rape took place on October 7. This is atrocity propaganda that is not new. This has happened throughout all kinds of settler colonial conquest. This is what the American settlers said about the indigenous population, right? This is what the Klein said about black people. This is always like, you have to dehumanize to justify to the rest of the people that like the violence that you are going to subject them to is totally permissible. They're savages. They're barbaric, rapist savages. It is a trope for a particular reason. It is unironically the weaponization of sexual assault. The reason why I also found it particularly gross was because he demonstrated that he didn't even care about what I was saying, or he didn't even care about what anyone was saying in that regard. Simply was just like, oh, you're going to speak over this victim? You're going to speak over this victim? When in fact, the video that he showed of me prior to the victim speaking out was literally me recognizing said victim. There's never been a moment where I've said that there was no rape that took place, that especially after October 7. I've always maintained the position that there is a likelihood that sexual assaults might have happened on October 7. But the problem here is that Israel has actually destroyed the evidence and made it impossible. And his counter to that was, oh, out of the dignity for the victims, there was no time for forensic examination. And that's ridiculous, because you want justice to be served for the victims. The circumstantial evidence in this regard is not the same kind of circumstantial evidence you see in criminal litigation in an American court. This is a preliminary investigation that is supposed to open up the door to a full-blown investigation by the United Nations. That investigation has been blocked of Israel. That is what I was maintaining here. And the reason why it's important to note that is because a lot of the circumstantial evidence that they've actually brought forward in the UN report, by Israel's own admission, has now been undermined through forensic examination. When you saw gruesome images from October 7 and people pointed to them to say like, no, this person has been raped. And then those people, the ones that weren't actually killed in the process, came out and said that that did not happen to them. This directly undermines and showcases the importance of going beyond circumstantial evidence in terms of like analysis of footage, especially when considering that there was plenty of atrocities that took place on October 7. I've never discounted that. It is one of the most horrifying live streamed massacres before what Israel did, of course, which is infinitely more horrifying than October 7, considering what Israel's been doing is a systematic, full-blown execution of all Palestinians and their lives in the Gaza Strip with significantly more sophisticated machinery. But having said that, considering that this was almost entirely live streamed, there was a lot of evidence that instantly undermined secondhand accounts that took place on that day. The worst part of this was he actually showcased the claims made by someone who I also have recognized, who I've never actually undermined the testimony of. Amit Shoshana, I believe, is her name. And the victim that he pointed to was one that I had actually talked about in the video that he showed. Prior to that. And then he claimed that she actually had been sexually assaulted on October 7 and was one of the victims from October 7. This is an important distinction to make. He tried to present this as like me denying rape, when in fact, I was talking about a totally different subject. When people say believe all women, that's the whole point of Me Too, is to not reflexively disbelieve women, because that's precisely what people do. There's never been a moment where I've reflexively disbelieved a victim that came out. My question to Ethan was, who are these victims? What are their names that have come out? Because you might know something that I do not know from all of the things that I have read on this matter. And the secondary position that I have maintained always, which Ethan at a certain point also recognized that he went back on, is the fact that even if there's an endless amount of evidence and it's like verifiable, there have been mass that took place, Israel's reaction is still unjustifiable. You cannot do a genocide. You cannot do a genocide on an entire population that you are the belligerent occupier of because militancy in that process conducted sexual assaults. That is completely unacceptable. Nothing will make genocide acceptable. That is my position. That has always been my position. In the aftermath of that segment, he openly recognized that he had lied and he had actually smeared me as someone who did not recognize that sexual assault had taken place at any point. That is not true. And the part about this that I find unconscionable is the fact that he also turned around and made it seem as though the testimony that she delivered was one that I was actually diminishing when it was one that I actually had recognized. But then he turned around and used her as an example for October 7, a point that he was trying to make, which was that mass had taken place on October 7 and there were victims that had come out. There have not been, from what I have seen, if you recall, I think something very nefarious took place in the aftermath of October 7, as you guys know. Obviously, there were plenty of atrocities that Israel could point to, but they needed more, which is precisely the reason why they engaged in atrocity propaganda, right? 40 beheaded babies, babies lit on fire with kerosene, and all of this stuff that took place. Many of them were immediately discounted, right? Many of them were immediately discounted by Israeli media, as a matter of fact. And the reason for why they did that was because these are real victims. These are real victims that were slaughtered, right? So obviously, if you're Israeli media, you have to give them the dignity. You have to give their family members the dignity of understanding what took place. The only one that actually was left without any sort of counterposition was Hamas-backed systematized rape that took place on October 7. And I believe the reason why a lot of people were wary of immediately countering that position is because, of course, like there's a high likelihood of rape taking place, not systematized, but rape taking place on conflicts. This is my position as well. This is what I said as well over and over again. Ironically enough, in many of the clips that he was actually clipping out of context, I was debating other chatters saying there is still a likelihood that sexual violence took place on October 7 because that is a commonplace event in all conflict. Anyway, and for the record, like, the reason why I brought up the 40 beheaded babies and flamed babies in their crib stuff is because Ethan and Gila have brought that up far after it was officially recognized as propaganda that did not take place.
They went on a mission to kill as many people they can, no matter who it is, slaughter as many people as they could until they were stopped.
The mission was to kill civilians.
Yeah.
You can see their war plans. They went specifically to Kibbutzim to kill the inhabitants there. Those are not military compounds.
They flamed cribs with babies in them on fire. So, like,
come on, what are we talking about?
They went on a mission.
Yeah, like lit babies on fire and stuff. Like, that's not real. That's just like, why is that still happening? You know what I mean? Why are people still saying that? This is supposed to be an anti-genocide broadcast. Like, do you see what I mean? This doesn't make sense with the attitude that Ethan demonstrated yesterday, or at least like some of the things that he said yesterday.
More first-hand accounts. There's even a person that survived the Nova disaster. They managed to survive it, and then I think maybe a year later or a few months later, they ended up committed suicide because they couldn't bear to live having seen what they saw on that day.
Is there more than one person that committed suicide?
It might be more. For some reason, I don't know the exact number. I know there's for sure one that I know for sure, but there might be more. And I mean, the kind of stuff that they saw was like rape, gang rape,
mutilation, torture.
Yeah. So they had to witness that and could not bear.
Yeah. So this is like
they weren't first.
This is Gila Klein claiming that a No Festival survivors gang rape killed themselves because they couldn't deal with the trauma. She cites this as a part of her regurgitation of the genocidal atrocity propaganda, saying there's so much evidence for it. She's referring to a suicide letter that was posted online claiming this over 6 months ago, which has been debunked as a hoax by Israeli reporters a day after it came out. Even Hen Mazik and other Zionist propagandists who shared this initial report were forced to retract it 6 months after the fact that this suicide letter was revealed to be a hoax and was retracted by Israeli media. Gila is still using it as a point in her commentary to justify all the things that unfolded. This is what I mean. Here it is. This is Adam Shafir. A story that ran in recent days about a Nova survivor who saw horrors and committed suicide did not leave a single dry eye. After trying to reach the family to tell the story, the search turned into an investigation. We will reveal tonight in the tube that it is a complete fake. It is not clear what brings people to invent like this, but to cheapen the real plight of survivors and to play with the souls of others is simply disgusting. Do you understand? Like, this is a real weaponization of sexual trauma. This is a real weaponization of fabricated stories. So, for the record, with Amit Sosana and her testimony, this is where I disagree with Zay Squirrel, because it falls in the weeds here. Because their perspective on this is that she never said it was rape. She said it was sexual assault. I don't care to make a distinction between the two. Okay, you can get mad at me if you want, but I do think that it's valid to take her testimony as it is, even if she has changed it throughout this time. Now, the other side of this was the Zaka people that was used in the Sheryl Sandberg documentary. The Zaka people that were used in the Sheryl Sandberg documentary were known to be fabulous. They were outed by Israeli media, once again, to have lied. Look carefully how Sandberg withdraws back from horror. Yeah, so that's the other side of this. And I believe Ethan used one of the parts of the Sheryl Sandberg documentary, for the record. I'm never going to automatically discount new information. If new information has come out that I was oblivious to, that I was unfamiliar with. Christ, the New York Times is doing this again. Israeli hostage says she was sexually assaulted and tortured. I mean, I don't think that's a fake news. Hasan is a buy. That is like the most credible reporting on a direct sexual assault from. I think you can just point out the lack of evidence for systematized assault, and most importantly, talk about why you are disputing these claims in the first place, that they are used to support genocide. I feel like we can't definitively say what the scale of sexual violence was or wasn't on 10/7, so we can't seem counterproductive to weed on individual cases disproving one or the other. Don't roll over, but also don't get too in the weeds. No, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Yes, 100%. Because yes, the mass conducted by Hamas, like systematic rape conducted by Hamas, or even mass rapes that have taken place, was a way to basically justify what Israel was doing to the Western world, okay? To the Western world, it was not enough from their framework, from their perspective, that like they were doing a genocide because of all of the real violence and the atrocities that took place. Like, that wasn't enough. So they had to do the barbaric rape savages trope. Nazis themselves have done similar things, like Bloody Sunday. The Klan has done similar things with mass lynchings that took place, and race riots, or rather not race riots, but like pogroms that took place against Black Wall Street, the bombing of Tulsa. If you recall, the bombing of Tulsa revolved around the same old tropes about how black men are violent, promiscuous, sexual beings, and then it was elevated. That pre-existing stereotype, that white supremacist stereotype, was utilized in the bombing of Black Wall Street, in the bombing of Tulsa. Emmett Till's another example. Like, this is precisely why I think it's important to also carefully go through these claims that are being made. And I think Ethan, on the other hand, was incredibly careless in the claims that he was making, especially when he literally found himself in a lie and openly admitted that he was lying about my analysis over the subject matter. But it didn't even matter to him to openly state that he was lying and smearing me, as he did in real time on this issue, because he knew that ultimately there would be clips that would get pumped all over the timeline to continue the narrative, act like Ethan had actually presented real information. The only verifiable claim that he put forth was literally a claim that I also had read through and had kept repeating over and over again. How do you try and identify real anti-Semites who hide behind the term Zionism? Like, it's so easy for these actual races to just use Zionism as a term, as a gateway to their beliefs. How do folks dissect people's true intentions? Whenever motherfuckers start talking about the Talmud, that's a really good example. Whenever motherfuckers hyper focus on Mossad doing any sort of like blackmailing operation, which is true, they have, right? But only talk about Mossad. Whenever people talk about the mutually beneficial relationship between the United States of America and Israel, and make it seem as though Israel is the party that controls the United States of America. Is the Israeli lobby very influential in American politics? Absolutely. Are there a lot of Jewish advocacy groups that masquerade as Jewish advocacy groups when in fact their sole purpose of existence is to either do social conditioning for Zionism or directly defend the state of Israel, as we have seen in this past year in the way that even like the Congress of Rabbis have basically weaponized their religious status as a means to criticize other Jews that are speaking out against this genocide. I'll tell you what, a lot of anti-Semites, from what I have seen, that masquerade as people who are anti-Zionist, they will inevitably always reveal their true perspective. Anti-Semites love noticing things, like they'll point to their nose to be like, this is another dog whistle. Like, also, ask them about the Holocaust. That's another thing. Anti-Semites cannot stop themselves. I find it crazy. 70% of your coverage is about America being demonic for allowing this, and 30% highlighting the atrocity that Israel commits, yet somehow get tarred as being anti-Semitic. No, the reason why that happens, for the record, let me tell you something. Do you want to know why that happens? Ethan actually revealed that in a really funny and really selfish way in our conversation. In our conversation where I asked him dead on, like, why do you care less about Candace Owens, who you and I both agree is anti-Semitic, going on Theo Vaughn than someone like myself? Ethan in that conversation turned around and said, does anyone have the clip? That he respects Candace Owens and that he respects Nicholas Fuentes because they are out and about anti-Semites.
You think
Oh,
I'm
here.
anti-Semitic now? Because 2 days
I'm
ago
going
you
to
said I
answer.
wasn't.
I'm going to answer.
Okay.
Your
Or
form of
yesterday, I think.
anti-Semitism
Or 2 days
is way more insidious because it's silent, it's tricky. She's out there just saying what she believes, and I respect her for that. Nick Fuentes is just out there. Nobody knows that what's his stance on Israel. Candace Owens' stance on Israel. But you're tricky. What you do is deny the heritage of Middle Eastern Jews, stuff like that. You accuse them of being always the oppressor,
What?
always. Everything.
can you
And by the way,
point to-
you spent the first part of this debate calling me insane for what I think most people would perceive as blatant, obvious anti-Semitic
Ethan, I think-
acts.
You see? You understand? I am even more of a problem than Candace Owens is, than Nick Fuentes is. Why? Because I hide my anti-Semitism, whereas they are open about their anti-Semitism. Actual real question, what will it take for you to stop talking about Ethan? He apologizes. I mean, this is going to be, well, as I said already, I will be reacting to the context nuke in real time, alongside iDubbbz and maybe some other people as well, live to fundraise for not just the Creator Clash in general, but the charity that they want to fundraise for. I will be doing that, and that will be most likely the last time I talk about it, unless he turns around and actually tries to do more Hasbra. Outside of that, it needs to reach a level of like Israel defense that I think is unconscionable for me to talk about it, which was my initial standard anyway. Twitter is claiming your latest vid has a negative like ratio. The extension is fake as fuck. What is it? Let's see. What are people claiming on my video? What are they saying the like to dislike ratio is? Show me a link. Currently the extension shows that I have 18,000 likes and 25,000 dislikes. Do you want to know what it actually looks like? Boom. So maybe we can put this dumb shit to bed. Wow, what a worthwhile extension. I wonder if this will make its way to LSF. I wonder if this will make its way to Reddit. Probably not. Yeah, also, Ethan Klein is now reaching out to proudly genocidal Zionist Hen Mazik to get him to amplify his false accusations. The anime sword iDubbbz posted with is a swastika. And Hen Mazik is literally a genocide denier. Ethan Klein said he said it was a genocide, and yet he has on numerous occasions done completely contrary shit to that. There was another Zay Squirrel post that I wanted to get to as well. in terms of like and this is something I didn't know either. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. There were underage Jewish girls and boys who joined the partisan resistance against the Nazis. Ethan Klein said if Anne Frank had done the same, she would not be worth admiring. He's so obsessed with smearing any resistance to Israel. He's saying the most deranged shit imaginable. For example, Sarah Gorelnik was only 12 when she joined the partisans, and there were many others among the occupied peoples of the Soviet Union, France, Denmark, and the Netherlands. One of the greatest anti-Nazi films, which is reminiscent of Israel, is about this, which is called Come and See. I've been meaning to actually watch Come and See on the broadcast too. But he also did take credit for the ban. And also, I think he literally said like, this is what I was...
Gold got banned immediately, rightfully, duly. However, when it comes to Frogan and her friends shitting on Jewish people, shitting on Zionists, right?
Yeah, also, he already admitted to correspondence with Dan Solomon, Destiny's podcast co-host, who is the one who is contacting ADL directly. He has been involved with the ADL in banning and trying to get me banned, as well as all of these other pro-Palestinian content creators.
They need a lot of time to think about it. And I think...
You said Ethan's words can make him seem pro-Zionist and that he should be more thoughtful, but when he pointed out that your language can come off as supportive of terrorism, why not just admit that you're careless sometimes too to his fans? It made you look like you can't admit fault. I have no problem with the Houthis. Yeah, because I don't. What do you mean? If you think I'm a terrorism supporter for that reason, then yeah, I'm a terrorism supporter. What are you talking about? The Houthis and their militancy in the Red Sea is a perfectly moral action. What would you do if there was a genocide happening in your backyard? And Ethan had no answer for that. I also said, yes, some people think I'm a terrorist supporter and that's on them and not me. I also maintain the position that terrorism is an intentionally vague definition to deny people their normal due process, to deny people their human rights. Also, the difference between Ethan being called a Zionist and me being called a terrorist is Ethan is not getting potentially arrested for being a Zionist. I will most likely, at some point, I might actually get criminally charged. If this administration gets everything they want out of this situation, there is a real threat of legal persecution on the other side of this. Please stop being delusional. It is also perfectly warranted for people to call Ethan a Zionist. He has said he is a Zionist on numerous occasions. He has constantly conflated Zionism with Judaism. Jesus Christ. What are we talking about? This is so strange. It's so strange. We're acting like we live in a totally separate world, for the record. We're living in this one right now. Where in the state of Michigan, Attorney General Dana Nessel directed the FBI and local police to raid the homes of pro-Palestinian student activists who are American citizens. They really think you lost because Ethan conceded more points? First of all, that's not how a debate works anyway, but they're saying that because they're looking for any and every avenue. They're also probably going to say, well, Ethan was very loud in the beginning and that was good, actually. That shows power. And then Ethan was more restrained in the second half, which shows that he was actually, cooler. Cooler heads prevailed. It's just about trying to find a narrative to make it seem like their favorite content creator did not come across as unhinged when most people do.
When they finally suspended Frogan and
Here, why be so charitable? Because I know what he's trying to do.
Shitting on Zionists, right? They need a lot of time to think about it. And I think, yeah, like when the ADL got involved, that's only when they finally suspended Frogan and all the other people up on the stage. When a sitting congressman started writing letters, posting on Twitter, then they said, okay, we should probably do something about it.
Your face, idiot. And I did that shit. I'll take credit for it. I fucking did that shit. I hope she gets permanently banned. And
once again, Asmongold got banned immediately, right?
Yes, Asmongold got banned immediately because he said something that was ban-worthy. It took the ADL getting involved after you constantly crying, and also your partner in this crime of trying to frivolously deplatform pro-Palestinian content creators, to reach out to the ADL directly. Not you, but your partner in crime that you correspond with, that you openly admitted to corresponding with. By the way, he doesn't think it's a genocide, for the record. So I don't know what the that's about. The goal here is simple. It's to basically make sure that no one who's critical of Israel gets to be critical of Israel and has a large, prominent platform. They will do anything and everything to actively suppress any sort of anti-Zionist speech. And it's even more dangerous when it's anti-Zionist speech coming from someone who isn't anti-Semitic, who is against anti-Semitism. So you know what they're doing? You're still charitable? No, I'm not. I'm just being honest. I don't know what you mean by charitability. Yes, I think he's lying when he says that he recognizes the genocide. It is inconsistent with the way he's presented himself for the past 15 months. H3 just posted a clip. Oh, you. I can't believe I clicked on that. You son of a bitch. You got me good. Here's a week off.